Hello, everybody. Welcome to the first actual episode of Unfamiliar Territory. I'm joined by my co-host Sadine Rakin, or Kalikaiz.
Everybody, welcome.
And today we're going to be talking about Blue-White Familiars, the deck that Kali is most known for playing and has the most success with. But before we get into all of that, we're going to be talking about the metagame. So for May 16th, we're going to be talking about the challenge there. We're also going to be talking about the May 17th challenge. And we're also going to be talking about the 5-0s that happened this week. So sit back, maybe grab some to eat because this might take a while. And let's get into it.
So looking at the challenge on May 16th, our top 5 archetypes are Blue-Red Delver or Blue-Red Fae. Some players will play Delver, some players will not. And then the second most popular actually was Mono Black Control, which is starting to see a bit of a resurgence based on a lot of popularity in the Brazilian community and the Italian community, we believe.
Yeah.
And then third is Blue-Black Delver, and fourth is Elves, and then followed up by Mono Blue Delver. In this challenge, actually, Fogtron, or Tron, as we like to say, was the 6th most popular deck, with only 4 pilots, but they still placed one in the top 8.
That was piloted by Arclint. He is probably one of the most known Tron players.
It doesn't look like it looks like the top 8 is relatively straightforward, but a bit diverse. We have 3 Fae decks, the Blue-Black Delver, 2 Elves, the Fogtron, and then it looks like another Blue-Black Delver.
I think because of NBC can probably be contributed to who was it that went 5-0 in the premiere? Oh yeah, Leo Bertucci. Leo Bertucci, that's who it was, yeah. So he ended up going undefeated in the Mox qualifier, but ended up losing in, what was it, the quarterfinals,
I believe, yeah, he was kicked out first round of the top 8.
But I think that's probably why we've seen resurgence lately, because not only did he do really well in the Mox qualifier, he also won the, was it May 9th challenge? Yeah, May 9th challenge with NBC. So I believe that's why we've been seeing a resurgence of it again. After
that makes sense. I mean, people really like to play that deck and they like to talk about it, and then when you see somebody have a good record with it, they just can jump all over it.
Especially with him winning a challenge too, like that kind of shows that the deck might have some amount of strength right now in the meta.
Yeah, we're seeing maybe based off of his list, but a lot more Thorn of the Black Rose in those decks, and if they can get out their Thorn early and stop people from taking it away, that's going to really help. I wonder if it also maybe is due to a little bit of a lack of fast aggro. It seems like Stompy's kind of down.
I think with Bully being like somewhat low on numbers lately, like Thorn has been able to keep Monarch for a while. You could just, against like fairies, you can just kill all their fairies and then keep Monarch. But against Bully, it gets a lot more difficult.
That makes sense.
Because they have strains and such.
Yeah, they can go wide to get around edicts.
But with NBC, it's like they have to up the amount of cards that just say you win if they stay for long enough, like Grey Merchants and Thorn and those kind of things.
We're also seeing that with Yokibas.
Too. Those are all pretty good for like disruption and keeping your value train going, so you don't get like blown out by like a Deep Analysis or Mojager, for example.
That's absolutely
true. I think that's probably why we've seen a resurgence in NBC. I wouldn't expect it to be around for much longer because of Is It Fae seeing resurgence too, which is makes sense. I understand why it's coming back, because you have things like Demir Delver and Mono Blue Delver that were very popular there for a little bit, so it only makes sense that Fae would become popular.
All right. Getting into the 17th, Our top archetype was Is It Fae, and then Mono Black Control was the second most popular again, followed up by Burn, and then Tron, and then Elves. Followed closely by Affinity and Boros Bully, which each had an equal amount. I think probably that whole weekend, Mono Black Control was seeing a rise just based on a lot of people, like you said, trying it out based on previous people doing well. But they did place one in the top 8.
I would. It's kind of weird that only one would make top 8, especially with 12
We
pilots.
al- we also have a Pestilence in the
Yeah,
top 8. So it's kind of similar game plan.
piloted by, of course, Amoras, one of the best Pestilence player, probably the best Pestilence player right now.
It's funny because I know him as a
Yeah,
Blitz player primarily, but after Blue Monday, he switched directly to Pestilence and hasn't really
yeah,
looked back. You'll see him pop up on a 5-0 now and then with Is It Blitz.
yeah. But also, we have LSV that made top 8 with Is It Fae. He played only 12 creatures, those being Spellstar Sprite, Ninja of the Deep Hours, and Augur Bolus, and played 4 Accumulated Knowledge. So it's like a more grindier version of Fairies. And he ended up going 7-0 in Swiss, but lost in the quarterfinals, which is kind of sad. But
Well, he did lose to another
yeah,
Blue Red
he did lose to
pilot.
HHC. That ended up splitting the finals with Saralaga, I believe that's how you pronounce that. But they end up splitting. And Is It Fate technically won the challenge?
Yeah, Sarlanga,
Yeah, who
Sarlanga,
knows?
who knows? But that's an Affinity player in this
Yeah,
specific challenge. And we always see Affinity as a powerful deck. You're basically banking on people not having Gorilla
yeah.
Shaman games
I'm
2 and
not
3.
shocked that they
And
split
if they
either
don't,
because HHC is known for playing Fae. So it only makes sense that Saralaga would probably offer the split there because he know he would probably lose
nice.
due to the Mox Monkey.
So, were you seeing anything that stands out in the latest Pauper League? We've got Walls highlighted by Apis 72. That's always
Yeah,
fun to see. Uh, kind of a turbo combo deck. A lot of standard things with Tron, fairies, all the different types, Burn. Um, looks like Boros Monarch's still in there. We do see an Infect 5-0, mono green.
a cool deck that is Nathan P's Jessica Ephemerate list. He's been playing it for a while now. It used to be some old guys list, but since Ashley got banned, he hasn't really been playing it. So Nathan P kind of took over and started playing Just Guy Ephemerate again, and he's been having some success with it. And I think it's a pretty sweet list. I like it a lot.
And that's the one with no fixing.
Does yeah, no fixing, no prisms, just straight up Just Guy.
Nice deck to play. It's requires a lot of
Yeah,
patience.
it's a pretty fun deck to play out a lot, I think. We also have Red Deck wins that 5-0'd. You usually don't see Red Deck wins 5-0ing that often, so that's pretty nice to see.
Yeah. I was lucky enough to post a 5-0 with a variant of Blue White Flickers or Blue White Familiars, and I saw also that the Red Deck Win pilot was Tarty, but they're a popper grinder, and I think I've played them a lot on Tron, but they must have just been wanting to win. Interestingly, they don't have any previous postings
Yeah,
really. One in February with Mono White Heroic.
I usually
No, just Mono White Weenies.
yeah when I play against him, he's usually playing like some sort of aggro-y or control deck. I know I played against him when he was playing blue black, so he usually plays a bunch of random decks, I think.
So when I was thinking about this meta, it's like obviously it's very diverse if you look at this 5-0 challenge or 5-0, but the challenge is kind of grindy decks in this last week. So it kind of feels like a more mid-range format at this
Yeah,
time,
I can agree with that.
and I've been kind of gearing my approach to it based on that. If nobody's trying to kill me on turn 3, I have time to set up.
Yeah, I think right now you don't really need to play that much anti-aggro. Like, there's very few Stompy and Bully in the meta, to where you could probably just, like, lose game 1 against them, but focus on the other matchups instead, and try to have better matchups against stuff like Fae and all the other grindier decks, stuff like Mono Blue, and Tron and such.
So I think if anybody's looking to play in the leagues or in the upcoming challenges, preparing for a grind is definitely important. And you can see that with LSV's deck. He's very, very prepared to grind.
For sure.
Do you want to get into the Familiars deck so we can kind of give people an overview of how it works?
Actually, do you want to talk about your 5-0 list? Your 4-color flicker list?
Sure. So basically, we'll get into how Familiars works afterwards, but essentially, I took my normal Familiars blue-white deck, and I noticed that in the past when I was using Prismatic Strands as my anti-aggro, that I would get pretty much steamrolled by Affinity. There was almost nothing I could do. And then I had been using Gorilla Shaman to fight that, but I also thought about using trying to bring in Pyroblasts, because we're seeing a lot of mono blue or blue red or blue black Delver, and Pyroblast can fight the counter spells, but also deal with that early Delver. So my game plan was essentially like either fetch a red on turn 1 and blast it, and then play my Prism on turn 3, or get out an early Prism if I'm on the play, and then use those Pyroblasts to kind of blast them out. And then Moment's Peace is going to be there so that we can do anti-aggro in any format and just kind of like lock the people out of the game for a little while.
Moment's Peace is really good against Affinity and like stuff like Bully, where Strands is only good against like one of those decks. So
yeah, and every now and then you get hit by a Slivers deck and you're just like, come on.
It happens sometimes. Sometimes those Slivers, they just show up and they ruin your day.
Yeah, and you'll also notice that this the mana base here has no non-basics other than the utility lands, and that's specifically because I wanted to have the option to go kind of a turbo combo. I don't think that happened in the league very often, but with the Prophetic Prisms in this deck, you can kind of get around all the land destruction spells. So since Mono Black control has been having a rise, we're seeing a lot of land destruction out of their sideboard, and I don't want to be playing a bounce land into that. It's you can have a lot of negates in your sideboard to deal with it, but every now and then they'll snipe a bounce land. So here I can just play my Prophetic Prism. I don't even have to have a Plains.
Yeah, Prism is really nice against land destruction. Sometimes you just get you with like turn 1 Dark Ritual and it's like Ice Quake, and you can't really do anything. That's when it's rough.
Yeah, then you just have to wait. Hope that they never land their Thorn and they just come run out of steam. It was so silly because in this last week, when I did post this, I actually ran into some random land destruction decks. I ran into a guy playing. He just kept changing it. It was one time red-green land destruction, kind of normal with Utopia Sprawl and Stone Rain, and then he switched it to be this really spicy list where he was playing. It's a 1 mana red spell that says each player sacrifices a permanent. So if he plays it on his turn 2, you're down a land.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, I think that, yeah. And he also had, I think it was Raise, where you sacrificed a mountain and destroyed a land. And then he was playing Delve spells.
That's very spicy.
So it's pretty cool. And he also used the artifacts that have to make you return a land.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, the border posts?
And the border posts. He was using border posts. So, I was able to get through that with my prisms and my basics,
that seems like
which was nice. And my
seems like a bit of a non-bow with sprawls, you think?
Yeah, that was in a different
deck.
that was the second iteration, was, the Crack the Earth and some things. And then he actually had a card that I'd never seen before. There was a 3/2 for 2, where you have to sacrifice it unless you return 2 lands from your graveyard to your hand.
Huh.
So that was quite the synergy. And then he rounded it out with a bunch of Crack the Earths and Raises and just Anglers for his third attempt. Luckily, I was to get through
That
those
is
decks.
definitely spicy.
I think that'd probably be pretty decent versus
Yeah,
Tron.
probably. I think a turn one destroy your Tron land is pretty good against them.
Yeah, you have to get
Yeah,
there early. Stop from landing a prism or any card draw to
exactly.
get out of it.
All right, so now that we talked about your 5-0 list, why don't we get into Blue Light Familiars as a deck? So, the first thing is, what is Blue Light Familiars?
Blue White Familiars is our popper deck of choice for me, and basically you're trying to assemble a combo that lets you mill out your opponent, or have infinite mana or infinite life. Essentially, there's this card called Sunscape Familiar, which is 1 and 1 white, and it says that green and blue spells that you cast cost 1 less to play. So it's a cost reducer, and as we all know, that cheating on mana is very powerful in Magic, and especially Pauper. So when you have 2 of those, you can combine it with the card Ghostly Flicker, which says exile 2 artifacts, creatures, or lands you control and return them to the battlefield under your control. And if you have 2 Sunscape Familiars in play, then Ghostly Flicker only costs 1 blue, and if you flicker an island and anything else, then that island comes into play untapped, and it essentially costs you 0 mana. So our old deck before Mystic Sanctuary was to flicker Mnemonic Wall and an island, which means that and then Mnemonic Wall lets you get back an instant or sorcery from a graveyard, and you're essentially just getting enters of battlefield triggers over and over and over and over, which you combine with Sage's Row Denizen, which says whenever another blue creature enters the battlefield under your control, target player puts the top 2 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. So there you just have an infinite mill on your opponent, or, if you need something specific, you can mill yourself for a little while. And then to finish off your turn, you can either pass it back, or you can target them with Deep Analysis to force them to draw and end the game there. The deck is kind of built around being a value and stall engine, where we use things like Snap to return creatures to the opponent's hand, or to use value, or Moment's Peace in this deck that I'm using, or Strands, or Stonehorn Dignitary to kind of stall out, and Godfarer's Faithful to block and to gain a lot of life and kind of put aggro you put yourself out of range of aggro decks. And we also have Mole Drifters in the deck and a lot of card draw to make sure that we're always winning the value game. I think that's kind of like a good overview of it.
So, what's your main game plan with the deck?
Sure. So, as you start the game, you're basically looking to make sure that your opponent doesn't enact their game plan. That's essentially what's going on. So versus aggro, you're trying to get out some early blockers and stop them from killing you. And versus something like Tron, you're trying to counter what they're doing or erase them. Or versus Fae or, another Delver deck, you're just trying to keep them off their angle. And you want to do that long enough to draw into your combo and then, mill down. So basically, this combo deck is trying to stall out until the late game and then just overpower them with mana advantage and card advantage, and until you get your combo and win.
There are matchups where you can try to focus on combo, or you can try to focus on value with Deep Analysis, or trying to get on Mole Drifters instead of just trying to assemble the combo as fast as possible against stuff for example, Tron, where you're just trying to get a turn 6 kill against them before they can do anything.
Yeah, absolutely. You can basically, against any aggro deck that's not able to gain a lot of life, you can just make sure that they cannot kill you by assembling some sort of infinite or very high life total, and then just attack them with Mole Drifters. Against something like Elves or Tron or Boris Boli, let's say, so against Elves or maybe even Bogles, their life gain is going to get out of range, and you'll not be able to beat them down, so you'll have to mill them out. And then obviously, because we're relying on flyers to attack with, something like Boros Bully or Boros Monarch, you basically need to mill them out in order to win the game. Unless you have some sort of infinite bouncer creatures and infinite counters situation going on.
So familiars can be a very, or blue-white familiars can be a very complex deck, and there are a lot of combos. So let's talk about a few of the combos, and let's first talk about the infinite life combo with Godfar's Faithful, because that one can come up a lot.
Yeah, so the new version of our deck is it's relying on this card that was released in the fall called Mystic Sanctuary. And Mystic Sanctuary, when it comes into play untapped, allows you to put an instant or sorcery from your graveyard on top of your library. And then because of that, this makes our flickering of an island very, very valuable. So we can flicker Mole Drifter, which when it comes into play, it draws you 2 cards, and Mystic Sanctuary, which puts which you can put flicker on top and then draw the flicker and another card. So essentially that draws your entire deck. If you don't have the Mole Drifter out, you can just flicker, let's say, Seagate Oracle and the Mystic Sanctuary to keep redrawing the Ghostly Flicker, and that'll give you infinite life.
I think the Seagate Oracle
and then
Faithful combo comes up quite often in this aggro decks.
Yeah, you also can if you're playing Mnemonic Wall or Archaeomancer, you can flicker Archaeomancer and Island at infinite time. And in my deck with Prophetic Prism, you can assemble the infinite life without any other card drawing engine because you can flicker the Prism and the Sanctuary to get the flicker trigger or the Faithful trigger, and just keep redrawing the flicker an infinite amount of times.
Yeah, so it's kind of like the old Astrolabe Familiars list, where you would flicker Astrolabe plus Mystic Sanctuary with Iceberg Handkerks instead of Sage's Row, smell them out.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of just giving yourself an alternate angle to be able to use. And then you can flicker. Let's say you're kind of behind and you have 2 prisms in play. You can just flicker the 2 prisms to draw 2 cards.
Just pretty much.
That's always good. Play Divination. Yeah, you got an instant speed Divination, which is quite good.
That can be pretty handy sometimes.
I just wanted to talk a little bit more about the Mystic Sanctuary. It gets a little bit confusing, especially to new players. Mystic Sanctuary says if there are 3 other islands in play when this comes into play, it enters untapped. And then you get the triggers and all the awesome things that follow along with that. But because of the rules of Magic, when it comes into play, it's asking the game state, were there already islands in play when I come into play? So if you have 2 islands and 2 Mystic Sanctuaries and you flicker 2 Mystic Sanctuaries, as they both come into play at the same time, neither of them are already in play when they're both coming into play. Mm-hmm. So you only have 2. So then you lose your flicker and your lands come into play tapped. And it's just very sad for everyone.
That's a mistake that a lot of the new players make. And it's very... You pretty much need to know that about Sanctuary. Always remember to, if you want to flicker both Sanctuaries, make sure you have 5 islands, including Sanctuaries. So have 2 Sanctuary, 3 islands, instead of 2 Sanctuary, 2 islands, for example.
Absolutely. And also, the way that the draw engine works is reliant on the way that the stack works in Magic. So, essentially, you have to make sure that the Mole Drifter trigger resolves after the Sanctuary trigger. So on Magic Online, what you would do is you would click the Mole Drifter trigger to put it onto the stack, and then click the Sanctuary trigger targeting Flicker. And then as they resolve, Flicker goes on top, and then you draw the cards. It's very important for that, as well as if you want to, let's say, have 2 Sanctuaries that you flicker on your upkeep, and then you put Flicker and something else on top, and you want to draw Flicker or that other thing first. You have to make sure that you stack them correctly. So in that case, you would want to click, if they're both going to go on top of the library, you want to click let's say you want to put Flicker on top, you click the Sanctuary trigger targeting Flicker first, and then click the Sanctuary trigger targeting the other spell. That means that the other spell on top would resolve first, and then the Sanctuary trigger for the Flicker would resolve second, and then you would draw the Flicker.
Yeah,
it's all very convoluted.
Bit of a garbage program when it comes to stacking. It gets really...
At least it works.
When it comes to stacking up. So, the last combo that could come up fairly often is Snap combo. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So in the 5-0 deck, essentially you will have two flickers and a snap and a creature, which will you can tap two islands to snap a creature that untaps those two islands, and then you can tap them and flicker the two islands and put snap and flicker back on top, and then flicker drifter and sanctuary twice to redraw the flicker and redraw the snap. That'll be
Mhm.
infinite snaps, which is a bit difficult to do because of all the trigger stacking, especially on Magic Online. And of course, I should caveat that with that specific combo requires two familiars in play as well to reduce the flicker cost down to just the one blue. There are some other options if you're willing to incorporate Archaeomancer into your list. So if you have an Archaeomancer in your list, you can have just one familiar and a bounce land and a sanctuary that's active. So you can flicker the Archaeomancer and the sanctuary and put the snap on top and pick up the flicker with your Archaeomancer trigger, and then flicker Drifter and Sanctuary and redraw snap. So with the bounce land and the sanctuary, each flicker or you'll be able to tap for 3 mana. So then your first flicker is going to cost you one, your second flicker is going to cost you one, and then when you snap, it buys you back two. So you end up with net zero. You also can get infinite snaps in a much easier way. If you have two familiars out and two Archaeomancers out, you can flicker both Archaeomancers for just one blue and get back snap and flicker, and then
Mhm.
snap something and untap two islands. So that'll give you a net zero mana, and you can just keep buying
With
back
that
snaps.
combo, specifically with two Archaeomancer, you don't exactly need two familiars. If you have two islands out, you do need two familiars. But let's say you have like Azorius Chancery out. If you have one Azorius Chancery and one island and one familiar, you can also snap their board doing it like that. Because
Yeah, that's also
flicker would
correct.
cost two and
Good point.
snap would cost one, and you net zero every time while snapping their board. So
Yeah, in terms of the snap combo, essentially the bounce land will act kind of
yeah, for
as
sure.
another familiar,
I think
which is
with
nice.
snap specifically, I like to play like two Chancery, so that combo comes up fairly often in my lists.
Yeah, you can just like with one familiar out, you'll be able to get infinite snaps with
Yeah.
the two Archaeomancers, and you'll also just be netting infinite white mana since the whole combo costs you three,
Sadly, the
but
infinite
two
white doesn't
blue,
come up quite
and
often.
then white mana is not super
It
helpful.
doesn't.
Yeah, what's nice with the Prism list is that let's say you had one Sanctuary and three islands and a Plains and a Prism, but you have two familiars and two flickers and a drifter, you can actually make infinite mana that way because you can tap the plains and the sanctuary and then tap the prism for blue and then flicker the prism and the sanctuary to get back the flicker and then flicker um, the drifter to redraw whatever other flicker. You'd have to have two flickers for that, but essentially you can use your plains as an alternate island. So here you go. You have Sanctuary, you got four other islands. You tap two islands. You flicker those two tapped islands. You put Flicker on top. With your second Flicker in hand, you're going to tap Sanctuary and flicker Moldrifter and Sanctuary and redraw two flickers. That means that you have one blue mana floating. So at that point, you can get infinite blue mana. You can also get infinite white mana if you want to do the same thing but target a plains
With
and
infinite
Sanctuary.
white, if you're playing Prism, this actually comes up a lot in the Rainbow Familiars list, which we'll actually talk about in a future episode. But with the Rainbow Familiars version, that list plays Prophetic Prism. If you play Prophetic Prism in general, you can turn that white into a blue and draw your deck if you have Sanctuary plus Mold Drifter. So you can turn that extra white into drawing your deck pretty much. So that does come up sometimes,
Yeah.
but or you can just turn it into like whatever color you need later.
So all these things are just very
Yeah,
slow in Magic Online, though. It makes sense to the less convoluted
yeah. These, if you're playing in paper,
combinations.
these are nice to know, but on Magic Online, they're not very feasible because it just takes so long. Yeah.
not easy to do. In paper, you can just say,
I,
"Hey, I'm going to
I'm
do
gonna do
this,"
this in
and
bed.
you win.
Your deck is gone. I win the game.
There's a couple little bit more convoluted ways to do things. We talked about drawing your deck with the flickering, the drifter, and the sanctuary. I talked about how you get an extra card there. You can just do that infinite amount of times. So you just draw your entire deck, which means that as soon as you assemble that combo, you can draw through your deck until you find your win condition, which is the Sage of Denizen, and then play it and then mill them out. So even if your Sage of Denizen is kind of near the bottom of the deck, you'd be flickering your Drifter for, let's say, 3 minutes on Magic Online, draw it, play it, flicker again for three
Yeah.
minutes, and then your opponent is
And
gone.
one thing that
It's
actually comes
quite
up a lot,
nice.
if your Sage Throw is fairly low on the bottom, and you find it, let's say like you have 3 cards left, you can play a Seagate Oracle and start flickering that so you don't deck out. With the Seagate, you can grab Flicker,
Absolutely.
and you're able to mill out your opponent instead of decking yourself with Mole Drifter. So that's a nice trick to know.
Yeah, what I like to do in that situation is I'll draw myself down to 0 and then play my Seagate Oracle
Mm.
or have one in play already. And then the first time you play it, if you're on 0, there's no trigger. I mean, the trigger does resolve, but Magic Online doesn't ask you to pick a card because there's no cards to pick from. And then you can just flicker the Seagate Oracle and the Sanctuary and put the flicker back. And there's only one card to choose from, which means that the clicking around is much faster.
And also the good thing about Seagate Oracle is that you're not technically drawing a card. So with 0 cards in deck, you don't deck out of
Yeah,
it.
that's important. I think I killed myself once with a brainstorm when I was trying to win,
Yeah,
and I had like
yeah,
two
it
cards
is.
in library or something.
It's very good that Seagate does not draw a card there, because it does come up sometimes. Sometimes.
There's one very difficult combo to pull off with a Seagate Oracle, in which you can, let's say, so basically you can win the game if you assemble what we would have normally done with the draw your deck combo, but you only have a Seagate Oracle and you don't have a second flicker. Well, sorry. First thing that you can do is if you have a Seagate Oracle and 2 familiars in play and an active Sanctuary, and by active Sanctuary I mean the 3 other islands in play, you can continuously flicker Seagate Oracle and pick the flicker out of the 2 cards that you see until you see whatever card you want. And at that point, you can
Yeah,
pick that card instead. So if you have 2 flickers in hand, this means that that's a demonic tutor for whatever you want. And obviously, you would pick the Drifter, and then you can go off with the Drifter and redraw and draw your deck and win from there. Now, assuming you only have 1 flicker in hand, that's not super helpful because if you combo out and just draw the Drifter, you're still
yeah,
going to die next turn when you pass the turn. So what you can do is flicker until you see Ghostly Flicker and Drifter on top, but pick the flicker. So this means that at the very bottom of your deck is a Mole Drifter. Now, let's just say that you had 40 cards in your library. You can now flicker the Seagate Oracle and the Sanctuary and pick Ghostly Flicker 38 times. And then at that point, you'll be in the right spot. So it's basically deck size minus 2 is how many times you need to flicker. And then you have random card and Mole Drifter on top. So you flicker Seagate Oracle and Sanctuary, and then you click the Sanctuary trigger targeting the flicker first, so that will resolve second, and the Seagate Oracle trigger will resolve first. And then you can pick the Mole Drifter, and then the flicker will go on top, and then you can evoke the Mole Drifter, draw the flicker, and go off from there. It's very important to note that this requires 2 open blue mana, one of them being the Sanctuary that's in play, at least. Because if you only have the one, you're not going to be able to accomplish your goal. And additionally, this takes a very long time, so I would not recommend doing it game 1. Game 2, if you have 15 minutes on
I
the
think you
clock,
can
you could
pretty much
probably pull
only
it
do it on
off,
paper.
and your opponent's going to hate you.
Oh,
I have actually done it before. I would say I won probably
wow.
5 to 10
I think
games that way.
I think of my like 8 months of playing familiars, I've never done that ever. So
I pretty much always try
yeah,
to win if I can win. It's like if you have a
just
deterministic
do it.
combo, you have to go for it. But recently, what I've done is like, okay, I probably am going to time out if I go for this. So what's my best option? I'll either flicker. If I have a lot of open mana, I'll flicker until I get a deep analysis, and then just take that and try to draw 4 cards
Yeah,
and keep
today
going.
in TPS or Tropical Puffer Saturdays, I think one of the most important things to note is you don't always have to win on the spot. You know, like Citrus Row is good, but
Yeah,
sometimes it's longer to combo off than to just beat down with Muldrifter. Even though it might seem a bit sketchy, most of the time correct to just beat down with Muldrifter to save time. If you're this is only if you're playing out MGO, of course, but it's sometimes I would just like draw until I find like 3 to 4 Muldrifters, and I'll just start beating down from there. And at that point, you have like 7 counters in your hand, so
yeah,
you pretty much win.
yeah. A very well-known player, I would think, is
Yeah,
Birdman or Entropy 263 on Magic Online. He likes to play without the Sage Road Denizen in the main deck, and just bank on being able to snap out the opponent and beat down with the Mole Drifters. I think it's a valid plan. Um, I guess if you have drawn your deck, you'll probably be able to get infinite snaps. It's just going to be
yeah,
very bad against Bully
yeah. That's why in
and something like
my blue
House.
white ephemerate lists, I play it sideboard because there's like a handful of matchups where you need the Sage Show, but I think it's better to not have it in the main deck and instead having the sideboard where you can bring it in against those decks where you like really need it, like Tron and Boros decks and such. But I think it's mostly personal preference, to be honest.
Yeah.
It could be
Eh,
suboptimal. Who knows?
I mean, and then what we should talk about, if you're in paper, you can sub out the Sage of Denizen for something like compulsive research. Because if you are able to combo off on let's say turn 6, you should be able to not make your land drop for the turn, and pull your second sanctuary at least, and then make infinite mana, and then you
Yeah,
can do the infinite compulsive. So infinite compulsive would be compulsive research targeting your opponent, and then flicker 2 sanctuaries, putting back flicker and compulsive research, and then flicker drifter twice to draw both of those again. And then at that point you'll have, I believe, the 1 mana to cast your compulsive research again. So
hmm,
you just win from there. I mean, obviously you are giving your opponent cards, so you have to draw into all of your counter spells. And if they have, like, let's say, really high cost counter spells like Devious Cover Up, or maybe that's not going to work
yeah.
either.
Syncopate could work, but
Syncopate, I don't know. You're most of the time going to be able to win. You're most of the time going to be able to win with um,
yeah,
your compulsive research. And in paper, you're already just going to win immediately on the spot, so you might as well put something in your
complete the
deck
deck.
that's not
Yeah,
a blank. Yeah, basically. Although, in this meta right now with Sanctuary everywhere,
yeah. It could be like a
Sage Road
Thoughtscour
Denizen sometimes
sometimes.
can help.
I don't hate it at all.
Yeah.
I think it's
I
fun.
actually, yeah, I a couple of times I've like played out Sage Road Denizen and then just dropped a creature after that to screw with the Mystic
Yeah, that's
Sanctuary
a
out of
great
a
feeling.
Delver player. And yeah, recently I had a game where I had 2 familiars in play and I just didn't have anything else going on, but I had Sage Road Denizen and a Seagate Oracle. So I was like, I'm gonna die if I don't get something going. So I played out the Seagate. I'm sorry, played out the Sage Road Denizen and then the Seagate Oracle, and I targeted myself with the mill trigger, and then I started milling out and finding deep analysis to
Yeah.
keep drawing cards and
Couple
go off from
like
there.
this actually came up a few times today. I just played Sage's Row because I just didn't have much. I flooded out a lot because variance is a thing. But I had like Seagate Oracle, so I would mill myself. I played against like Bully, where you don't really want to mill them if you don't have to, because they have things like Rally the Peasants, Battle Screech, those kinds of cards. So I milled myself to find deep analysis, and I pretty much won from there just by milling a couple deep analysis.
That's
So
awesome.
I think it can come up a lot of the yeah.
Sometimes
It's
stuff like
like,
that's
do
kind
you
of
want
tricky
to
to think
slowly
about.
mill them for the chance of you dying from like a double Rally the Peasants, or do you want to try to find deep analysis to find your pieces, kind of thing?
The greatest feeling in the world is letting a Boros opponent
Yes.
mill out to their own monarch trigger. So
There's a couple times where I just like ephemerate Archaeomancer for deep analysis, and you, like chip off 8 cards a turn. It's awesome when you do that.
I had a match where I was against a pestilence player, and they killed my Sage Road Denizen, and I basically they got the monarch, I believe, and I really didn't. I think I only had 1 familiar left, So I just kind of hung out and tried to not die until they had 10 cards in library, and then I deep analysis them twice and then compulsive
Nice.
them, and they lost. It was great. You just got to do
Yeah,
whatever
there was
people don't see
a
coming.
game today where I played against Mono Black Control, and they just slammed a Crypt Rats, and I had like 7 cards in the deck, but I had Flicker in hand because I pretty much had the kill with more drifters, but they ended up wiping my board. So what I did was Flicker Mortuary Mire plus Mystic Sanctuary, and I just ended up drawing everything back and like reset my entire board in like 2 turns.
Yeah, it should be noted that if you want to on your upkeep, if you have one familiar, you can flicker the 2 Mystic Sanctuaries, and then that's net 0 mana, and put back flicker in some other card, or you can on your upkeep flicker Mortuary Mire and Mystic Sanctuary like you did to draw
Yeah, when you
Drifter
have
and then
like
evoke it
the
and keep going
complete
off.
kill, you can't deck out. That's the cool thing. Against the decks like Mono Black Control, you just can't deck because you can just flicker 2 Mystic Sanctuaries and always have, or like a Mystic Sanctuary Mortuary Mire, like you said, and you will always have infinite amount of cards in your library, no matter what happens. So that can come up a few times. So I think we
Yeah.
pretty much covered most of the combos here. So let's talk about your most recent lists, starting with your Mox qualifier list that you got second with. Let's talk about that list.
So looking at this list, I decided to include and exclude in the main and drop a Prismatic Strands. I was thinking that I'd be playing a lot of like Fae and Tron and kind of grindier things. Maybe Boros Monarch. I didn't expect to be up against any super fast aggro, but I decided to use Stonehorn Dignitary in the sideboard in order to increase my possible sideboard slots. So I did not splash for the Gorilla Shaman here. I just have 3 Stonehorn Dignitaries, 3 Prismatic Strands in the 75. The exclude in the main allows me to remove one of the remove souls in the sideboard, and then I have a 4th Prohibit in the 75 in our sideboard here, specifically because I felt like that's gonna make my Fae matchup really, really good, and really, really make an impact on the Boros Monarch matchup, because all those prohibits are going to hit all their impactful creatures. And then I wanted to do the 4 deep analysis for the grindiness, as I said, and
Yeah.
the rest of it's pretty straightforward, I think. But the exclude main did help. It helped me beat
Yeah.
Modern Monkey on Tron. He did not. I think he had a prohibit up and then played like a Dinarova, and I had excluded it game one. He was just
Yeah,
like
exclude is very,
shocked.
very good against Tron. So if you're in a Tron meta, I would highly recommend.
It's one of those things where I think a one of
Yeah, for sure.
is fine in familiars because you can generally play it, and it's not always terrible to hold it up. But like if you don't have a familiar out, 3 mana is kind of a
Like
big tax,
it's
especially
really
if
good
you have
against like the
2.
grindy decks like
It's
Tron
not
and
something you want to be
Fairies,
doing.
where you can like get rid of like Spellsetter Sprites or Dinrova.
Yeah.
Or yeah.
Or if you exclude a Mole Drifter, it's just epic.
Yeah,
It feels like a
crazy.
6 for 1 or something.
Deep analysis, I think, is pretty like you want to play. You want to be playing for Tron and Fairy matchups for sure.
Or what essentially this 4 deep analysis has been in the list, try to break through the sanctuary locks, because if they counterspell the
Yeah.
first part, you're still going to draw 2 cards. So, and if you have no familiars out, 6 mana draw 4 is not that bad. I think it's opportunity,
Yes, it is opportunity, I believe.
but it's not a terrible cost. But as soon as you
Yeah.
have a familiar out, 4 mana draw 4 is really good, and then
It
2
just keeps
familiars
getting
out,
better.
it's 3 mana draw 4.
And it's also like
Fantastic.
really, really
Yeah.
good with Snap. Really good with Snap.
Yeah, yeah. I decided to go for my 3 snap, one echoing truth. I was really liking having echoing truth as
Yeah,
kind
you
of
do
like a
like your
main board
Echoing
out
Truth.
to anything, and it's just so nice to like if somebody journeys you, you're like, I don't care, I'll get it, and then you can win against pestilence way
And it's also
easier
really good
game one,
against
I
Bully,
think, with an echoing truth.
since there was expected to
That's
be
true.
like
Yeah,
some amount of Bully players because half of them were qualified with Bully, so it was pretty nice to have one of those, I would think. Yeah.
yeah, I like it. I've actually had games where it's probably results oriented, but I think I Echoing Truth 3 stages or
Yeah, I
Seagate
know whenever we play
Oracles,
against
and that
each
was
other, you
really, that
always
felt good.
like echoing truth. You're familiar, and then you bounce my familiar.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah,
not. That's something you got to watch out
it's pretty
for. You're
funny
playing Echoing
when
Truth.
that happens.
Like, but I think I did. I had a Muldrifter in play, and my opponent went Muldrifter
Drifter,
Ephemerate, and
yeah.
I just Echoing Truth my own
I
Muldrifter,
remember.
and then it's
I
loser
know a lot of
Ephemerate.
people do that with echoing
It's like
truth, where they
okay
just like try to kill like your mold drifter, and then they kill theirs too.
for Echoing
Yeah,
Decay.
it's so funny whenever people
Yeah,
do
that's
that.
no good. Well, it's like you don't play the mirror as much, and then you've run into that situation, and you just didn't think about
Yeah,
it. You got to be on your game. That's one of the things with this deck. Like as soon as you like
it really
lose
does.
focus, it just all
This
goes
deck
to
really does
hell.
take a lot of thinking, especially in the mirrors.
So like, yeah. So essentially, like your game plan, you're trying to get to the late game because this game just goes so or this deck goes so far over the top of everybody. When you open your hand, you should
Hmm.
be thinking like, can I get to 3 mana, and do I have white mana? So first of all, 3 mana is very important because you can evoke a Muldrifter, you can play a Seagate Oracle, and then that's just going to keep drawing you cards and kind of chain reaction. And then white mana is going to help you with your stall cards, like in this specific list, Stonehorn Dignitary or Prismatic Strands, and then obviously being able to play your Faithful out. Because if you can get an early Faithful in a matchup where you know they're not going to kill it,
Oh yeah, for sure.
it's going to set you very very far ahead. And in the mid game, you basically try to figure out how the opponent is going to win and whether or not you can disrupt that. So for something like Stompy, it's pretty straightforward. They're going to be trying to kill you with their creatures. So you'll try to, in this list, like wait till turn 3 when they attack, play Prismatic Strands, and then on your turn 4, play Seagate or play Sunscape Familiar, and then immediately play Seagate Oracle. So that's like 4 mana. And then if they attack, you can just block. And as long as they're not going to kill you, you don't have to flash back the strands. And then if they, or if they try to swipe before combat, you just use the strands as a
Yeah,
negate and the fog is kind of like 2 for 1, which has been something that I like doing a lot. Um, and then in the late game, you just basically keep searching for your flicker
yeah. I
combo,
think
and
the
then just
like
get there.
hands that you want to
Um,
keep are: do I have both colors? Do I have at least 3 mana? And can I cast things? Those are kind of like:
yeah, and
do
am
I
I going
sit
to
here
do
for three
something?
turns, or do I like curve out by playing like one drop and then cantrip and etc. etc.
Yeah, you should
Yeah,
really be
for sure.
trying to do something at least by turn 2. If you're because if you're you can definitely get away with like turn 1 fetch, turn 2,
Yeah, that's
fetch
passable.
preordain. That's pretty good. But I would say the optimal start is like turn 1 fetch planes play, and then
Yeah,
turn 2 like faithful, and then into
and
preordain. That's probably really
the reason you want to
fantastic
have three
against
mana
almost all
in your
opponents.
opener is because almost everything in the deck costs 3 mana, except for Mold Drifter and Deep Analysis. Mold Drifter's technically 3 mana, but like almost every card in your deck has 3 mana, so that's why you usually want to have 3 mana in your opener.
Yeah,
Yeah,
or like 2 and a cantrip or something. But basically, you want to be the master of your own domain, and if you kind of like rely on your deck to serve you the
yeah. I
lands,
did.
I
I
just find
did
that very
lose in
sketchy.
top four because I kept a couple sketchy hands that didn't pay off at all. But
Sometimes you gotta
gotta live on the edge
you gotta
sometimes.
pray to the RNG.
So, let's talk about your
uh,
um, most recent list that you've been having a lot of success with. That I also played in Shop Call Popper Saturdays.
yeah, so here we're the Discord was talking, and I was looking at the meta with you guys, and we're thinking like, okay, this is a kind of a grindy or mid range format, so it's one where if you go really over the top, it's going to be extra good. So what we're doing is we have decided to use bounce lands again and go up to the 4 full snap. And so with our 4 chanceries, and we're going to be gaining a mana advantage every time we snap something, basically no matter what. And then I'm maxing out on Seagate Oracles and Deep Analysis. I'm also including 2 Archaeomancer and 2 Ephemerate in the list, which allows for the busted starts of like really busted start would be Sunscape Familiar into turn 3 evoke Drifter and ephemerate it. But you can still, without any mana reduction, play
Yeah.
evoke and
Good
ephem
old 4-mana
on turn
Chaucer's.
4, which is really good. I really like to bring in
Yeah, same
negates
here.
over dispels against burn. Um, they just
Yeah,
everything is a sorcery. It feels like now you don't, because of the Mystic Sanctuary and what you're referring. If you have two familiars, if you have two familiars and a mnemonic wall and two bounce lands, you can snap the mnemonic wall and replay it, and it will be
yeah,
enough to get back snap and snap it again. So then that can give you all of the interest of battlefield triggers for Sage Road Denizen to mill out your
yeah. And it
opponent,
also doesn't really
but it's
come up
much,
that
much slower
often.
than the flicker.
It used to be very much all in
Yeah, I think I saw.
back in before Sanctuary. So some people play like 2 Sages row for it to be more consistent. Now with Sanctuary, you don't really need wall,
Mm-hmm.
and it's much more clunkier to do that.
Good.
This is the list that I think Colosi, me, you, and Calpine made. I hope I'm not forgetting anybody, but those were the
Mm-hmm.
first 4 that came off the top of my head. So I think we all came up with this list, and this list is probably the best one that we've had in a while. I think it's I think it's probably the best
Yeah,
Sanctuary
I
list
think.
that I've probably played because it feels so smooth. With 4 Chancery, like you're never gonna run out of value.
Yeah, so here you're basically saying I'm never gonna be outvalued by anybody. You're always gonna make your land drops with the bounce lands, and then you have like basically rituals with the snaps. You have four
You
ofs
have
of all your
Ephemerate
draw cards,
for like the
and
possible
you have
I win
ephemerate.
turn
Yeah,
4 kind of thing.
so like yeah, and you can also like if you have a familiar out and two bounce lands, you can
Yep.
just go evoke drifter, snap it, evoke drifter, snap it, evoke drifter, snap it. You're just drawing
Like
tons and tons of
against stuff
cards,
like
and your opponent's kind
Mono
of
Black
like
Control,
outvalued
it's
for
just
sure.
like
And
you slam Drifter plus Snap or Drifter plus Ephemerate, and you just automatically win the game. Because all their 1-for-1 removal can't catch up.
yeah, so
Yeah,
you just
pretty
have to
much.
avoid getting monarched. But it seems really smooth, and I'm definitely going to keep going forward with this for a while. And we're looking at maybe changing a
Yeah, I
card or
think it's
two,
a
but
very solid
it
list
seems
right
like it's
now.
in a good spot. And it's funny is like partially this was I was thinking about this based off of like what you were doing,
Yeah.
and then also like kind of like looking at old blood pet lists where he's just on 4 preordained and 22 lands. And I had originally started with like 3 Azorius Chanceries and then I think 4 or 5 fetches. But
Yeah, I think I just do.
I think it's in a good spot. Basically, like when you get your lands and things start happening, it's just like
The
too
mana
many
base
things
is
are
definitely
happening.
a
I
lot
feel bad
different
for
than
the
the regular
opponent.
stock list, though. Because usually lists play like 3 Sanctuary, 1 Plains, and like 3 Ashbarrens, 3 Evolved Wilds, and sometimes no Chancery. But this plays the full 4 Chancery, only 2 Sanctuary, and 2 Plains for Ephemerate. So it's a lot different, but it feels a lot smoother because Chancery always has like both colors, and you always have land drops too. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I think the always having land drops thing is pretty important because this is like when you lose is either because you flooded or and never drew a draw card, or you just don't make your lands. And if you can keep a hand that has an island and a chancery, uh, that's
yeah,
great because you're gonna get to 3 lands really easy.
hmm
It's like
yeah.
an
I
extra
think if
draw
you guys
spell.
want to get into familiars, I would definitely recommend this list right
Super
now.
excited.
It's probably the most up to date list at the moment.
Yeah. So if you're looking at the list, we're thinking about like what things are stock and what things are kind of flex. I would say that obviously you need your four familiars, 4 preordains, and then
hmm
you need 4 Muldrifters, um,
Yeah, yeah, that's pretty
two
stock. Yeah,
flickers are probably stock. You can get by with not
yeah,
having the third and doing something else, and then you obviously need your Sage or Denizen. So that's the core cards that create the combo and do the setup. Seagate Oracle has been used for the majority of the time because
hmm
when it enters the battlefield, it can draw you a land, even though it looks only at the top 2. But that's why we use it over the Augur Bolus.
yeah.
I don't really like to go below 3 of them, but I
I
think
also
you can
like
get
how
away with
Seagate
doing
can
3 if
grab
you have 4 deep
familiars when you're
analysis.
looking to combo off. Or you can also grab drifters and pretty much everything else. I think gain instant sorcery doesn't really matter a lot
Yeah.
of the time.
And then I think I would probably not go below 2 deep analysis, especially in this meta. But I would think that like 3 Seagate Oracle and 3 deep analysis is kind of stock at this point. Like you wouldn't want to go below that. And then the God Pharaoh's Faithful, because they block ninjas and they gain you a lot of life, versus like aggro decks, I probably wouldn't go below 3. So 1 would be like a flex card, and then in this most recent list specifically, Snap has an interaction with the bounce lands, so I'm not going to go below 3 on those. But you could maybe just do that. I like to have all 4
today,
just for so much crazy value times.
They were pretty good. I did not play.
Did you miss?
I only played 3 with an extra Stonehorn. So that was the only like different thing that I played. And speaking of possibly,
do you feel like you
I think 3 is fine.
4th?
I would rather have a cantrip, I think. But I don't know. I like Snap, but there's a lot of times where I was just like looking for non-lands, so maybe I want another cantrip instead. Especially with 4 Faithful, cantrips get a lot better.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Turn 2 Faithful cantrip.
I also think
That's really good.
Slot 2. Depends on the meta for sure. Like, if your meta is just pure control, you don't need any anti-aggro main, I think. You can just play like a compulsive research or more cantrips and stuff like that.
Yeah. And then I have 3 prohibits in my version and 1 negate instead of the Stonehorn. So that's why, that negates a flex slot. The prohibits, I think you want at least 2 counter spells in the main, and I like prohibits the most because they can stop spell setter sprites, and almost everything almost everything in Pauper is 4 mana or less. Yeah. So I'm looking at my deck, which is the most recent, and we also have the 2 I guess like in this specific deck, you really can't get by without having the 2 Ephemerate and Archaeomancers. So those are not flex options. But if you wanted, you could play the No Mancer only Flicker and only Sanctuary lists if you're confident. And then they have to go up on the cantrips to like assemble all the pieces, because you're not getting value out of just playing the Archaeomancer or the Ephemerate. And then like looking at this list, it looks like we have 6 flex spots, which would be 1 deep analysis, 1 Seagate Oracle, and 1 Faithful, 1 Snap, 1 negate, and 1 prohibit.
I think I think prohibit.
So there's things to play with.
3. I don't really like going into 3 at all. But I could see having 1 as a flex slot. It really depends.
Okay.
But
I would say I'm thinking of it as a flex slot. Like
minimum, you want 3.
I want 3 counters minimum.
Possibly. I could see going to counter spell.
Maybe a counter spell. That would open you up in the sideboard to not having to play 1 Essence Scatter.
Speaking of the sideboard, we should probably talk about that in the flex slots.
Which souls in the sideboard.
Yeah.
2 of those are specifically for Tron mainly, but they can be used for mono black control, which is a good spot, and they can be used for Boros Monarch, because the Core Skyfisher and Glenhawks are pretty much the way that you lose the game, because it gets them all the value and it also gives them a way to kill you. I would like to not do 2 excludes because I think it's too costly.
I like it a lot more with Ephemerate, where it's just like it always cycles itself there.
Yeah, that's just brutal. I did the first time I tried this list, I had exclude over negate in the main and over Stonehorn, and I just excluded something in Ephemerate and got back exclude, and then just my opponent quit. So
but if you're in a Tron heavy meta, the higher cost of exclude doesn't really matter that much.
That's funny, because I would have said this different. I would have said that the higher cost makes it worse because you can't hold up 2 counter spells.
Prohibit's not very good there, I think. But like turn 4, run up negate plus remove soul is nice. But I do like exclude more there, because you always want to like one for one them and always have a card. Like, exclude being able to cycle itself is very, very good there. Instead of just going like one for one on your mnemonic wall.
Yeah.
You're technically just like removing a resource from them.
Yeah.
While you still have the upper advantage. So that's just my thought on exclude there. But
exclude is just like I don't want to get baited in, but it's really, really, really good. We actually had a time in the Pauper meta, I think it was like December or January, when everyone was on exclude. Do you remember this? It's just like exclude.
I think
everyone was just
trying
to get all the value.
He was playing 4 exclude in his list. Yeah. With Boilerworks
in a Delver list.
That was spicy.
So, like, going over the rest of the sideboard, we got a little sidetracked on how to properly counterspell creatures, but we also have the need to counterspell non-creatures, and I have 2 negates for that, and then I have 1 dispel. I like to have 3 negates in the 75, and in my specific version, I have 1 of those negates in the main over the Stonehorn, and then my 4 Stonehorns are in the sideboard. I'm banking on not having to fight aggro game 1, and then hopefully getting the Stonehorns game 2.
I think when we play 4 Stonehorn,
and then 4
against decks like Stompy, you usually like just draw 1 to 2 usually. So, like losing game 1, you can usually make up for games 2 and 3 with the 4 Stonehorn.
Yeah, for sure. And then in my list, I have 2 Nature's Chant in the board. Nature's Chant is a little bit tricky because it costs 1 and a green or white mana. So that means that it's actually cost reduced by the familiar.
Yeah, I know.
Which is something that kind of people skip over, but it's very important.
You play Nature's Chant over like Disenchant, but it's mostly because of the familiar. Yeah.
It's just strictly better. Yeah. Strictly better in this deck.
You could.
Although you can play Disenchant if you want. I just don't want to pay 2.
But in my list, I've been playing Gutshot. I know you're not a fan of Gutshot.
Yeah.
I like it a lot versus elves, fairies, and I think it's just such a power play against spell starter decks in general, because they can usually go like turn 1 Miscreant, for example, and you could just like jam a turn 2 familiar while holding up Gutshot back up. So just completely blow them out. Or they could set up like a turn 2 ninja, and you can also blow
that's
them
true.
That way.
Yeah, I didn't think about being able to play familiar on turn 2 on the draw.
Very, very good.
That's nice. I mean, when you side in Gutshot, you're going to be usually going to be siding it in because you are losing to the Delvers, right? So you're going to be on the play turn game 2.
It's fine on the play. I like it on the play.
So it's not super good on the play, is it?
Like, it doesn't really matter. Because you could just go like turn 1 Pure Day.
I've been trying.
Or like turn 1 Faithful. And they can go like turn 1 Delver. You pretty much ruin their clock if they do that. Or just setting up that they're trying to set up spell setter.
Very true.
It's pretty good there too.
I really like building. I try to build my list basically to have the most impact as possible, to have the fewest cards that only matter in one matchup, which is why I have removed Solar or Disdainful Trope, which I originally did. Yeah. So like, I just didn't know any better, and now I get a really cool remove soul art. I just want to try to
I try to do that.
Be able to use my whole sideboard as much as possible.
Because like that's why I usually don't play like Sage Row and such, in my main decks.
That makes sense.
I've also been trying out Last Breath, which I think has impressed me quite a bit. But I think it's also pretty.
Well, it's just going to win you the mirror.
NBC and such. In Burn, it's also really good against Burn.
I guess what we have to do is try to figure out the meta, and then like what percentage of the decks do you need to Sage Row?
I think.
Figure that out, and then say like okay.
It's kind of like a.
Maybe I'll move to the sideboard.
Gutshot a bit. Like, it's still as good as Gutshot in the matchups like Gutshots are good in, but it's better because like you can get rid of like Ninja, you can get rid of Timberwatch, Elf, you can get rid of like those kinds of things. So I think it comes in pretty clutch there. It's also much better against
for sure,
because almost everything they have is under 2 power.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're never gonna see it coming.
I think I brought in
They can't,
almost
they can't
every game
they
we
can't red
played
blast it.
except for like one match. So it's maybe I think it's very versatile. Worth a
Well,
shot
maybe
for
that's your
sure.
flex card. Interesting. We'll have to see where you take
It
that.
is pretty sick. But
Sounds awesome.
I think I'll keep trying it a little bit more. Being able to play Seagate Oracle
Nice.
into Last Breath It against Burn is pretty dirty. Just to gain 4 life.
You last breath your own, dude.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. Yeah.
That's
Thank you all for watching
sounds good.
the first episode of Unfamiliar Territory. We'll be seeing you guys in 2 more weeks with a new episode. I hope you guys enjoyed. And if you have any suggestions for guests or any things that we should change, please let us know in the comments. We very much appreciate it. Make sure to follow Kalikaiz on YouTube. And where else can you find you? Reddit too?
Yeah, I'm on Reddit, Kalikaiz, and I'm
Find
on
me on
Discord as
YouTube. I'm sure I'll be
Kalikaiz.
posting
Happy
this.
to talk.
And find me on Twitter as well. It's also on Discord. You can find me on MTGO as Not Good. You can send me a message there if you wish. And yeah, thank you all for watching. We will see you all in the next episode.